All right, let's jump right in.
Sounds good.
Today, we're diving deep into Alex Haley's Roots.
Ah, a classic.
It's a story most folks have probably heard of, at least the name.
Definitely.
It traces the journey of one man, Kunta Kinte, from his life of freedom in Africa to the brutal realities of enslavement in America.
Right.
But on this deep dive, we're going to go beyond just the surface level.
Yeah.
And uncover the rich cultural tapestry of the Mandinka people.
Absolutely.
And explore how that culture was nearly destroyed by the slave trade.
It's a powerful story.
It really is.
And what I find so fascinating about Roots is it's more than just, a historical account. It's really a story about the power of family and heritage.
Yeah.
And how those bonds can survive even the most unimaginable horrors.
Yeah, absolutely. The resilience of the human spirit.
Exactly.
So we start in Kunta Kinte's early life.
Okay.
In Jufur, Gambia.
Mm-hmm.
And Haley's writing, he really brings this village to life.
He does. He creates such a vivid picture of Mandinka culture and really emphasizes the importance of lineage in that culture. Yeah. And, the significance behind names, like when Kunta Kinte is born, there's this whole ceremony, right?
Yeah.
And the Arafang, who is the village historian, the keeper of their oral traditions,
right.
This Arafang recites Kunta Kinte's ancestry going back over 200 years.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
That's incredible.
It really makes you think about how we've lost that sense of continuity in modern society.
It really does.
Like knowing your family history back that far.
That's a deep connection to your roots.
It is.
Something we just don't have anymore.
And for the Mandinka people, it wasn't just about, remembering the past. It was about understanding your place in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Connecting to those who came before and those who would come after.
Mm-hmm.
The sense of belonging.
Yeah.
It's really at the heart of their culture.
The book also talks about figures like the Haliba.
Yes.
The musician who plays the tobolo drum.
Right. And it's important to remember that music, it wasn't just entertainment. It was like a vital form of communication.
Yeah.
The Halibo would use this tobolo drum, which is also known as a talking drum, to send messages.
Oh, wow.
Between villages.
Awesome.
So different from how we live today.
That's amazing.
Where we're just bombarded with information all the time. But for them, it was much more intentional and woven into their lives.
It's like their communication was part of the rhythm of their everyday existence.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
And Haley does a great job of showing us, how Kunta Kinte's childhood experiences really shaped him.
Yeah.
We see him taking his first steps, learning about the hungry season, and even witnessing his grandmother's funeral rites.
That hungry season really struck me.
Oh, yeah.
As a powerful part of the story.
How so?
Well, it's this time of year where food is scarce and everyone has to really come together to survive.
Right. It's a harsh reality.
It is.
But it also speaks to their resilience.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how they adapted to this annual challenge.
Yeah.
They would sacrifice animals. They would pray for rain.
Right.
They would share whatever little food they had.
Yeah.
It shows that communal spirit that runs throughout the book.
Yeah.
It definitely challenges our modern individualistic way of thinking.
It does. It makes our focus on personal success seem kind of shallow.
A little bit, yeah.
When you think about it.
It's a good reminder that we are all interconnected and that we need each other.
Absolutely.
Especially in times of need.
Another fascinating part of the book is Kunta Kinte's coming of age.
Yes.
He joins the Kafo, which is a group of boys his own age.
Right, like a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Preparing for manhood.
And he starts learning the skills he'll need as an adult.
Exactly.
Tending goats, going to school, taking part in that annual harvest festival.
It's also different from how we experience adolescence today.
It really is.
Their education wasn't just about books and classrooms. It was about learning through experience, participating in the community.
Yeah.
There's this one scene where wrestlers from another village arrive.
Oh, yeah.
And it's announced by the talking drums.
Right.
And you realize this event, it wasn't just for entertainment. It was a display of strength, a ritual that brought everyone together.
Yeah. Their lives were so full of meaning.
It were.
Even in the everyday things.
And purpose.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But Haley doesn't shy away from the harsher realities either.
No, he doesn't.
Like when he describes the harmattan,
right?
This dry, dusty wind that makes life so difficult.
Yeah, it's like nature itself was testing their endurance, preparing them for the challenges to come.
And then there's the constant threat of slavery.
Yes, always looming.
even in this seemingly idyllic village.
It was a very real fear for them.
Yeah.
The possibility of being captured and sold.
This is really driven home when Kunta Kinte's father explains the horrors of slavery to him.
Such a powerful scene.
Yeah.
You can feel the fear and anxiety,
Absolutely.
knowing that this could one day be Kunta Kinte's fate.
It's heavy stuff.
It is, especially considering he's just a young boy at this point.
Right.
It shows how this threat of slavery cast a shadow over their entire lives. It's a chilling reminder of just how vulnerable they were.
It's almost a relief then
Yeah.
when we hear about Kunta Kinte's uncles.
Jana and Saloom.
Yeah.
What about them?
Well, they've left to build a new village.
Right, a different kind of story.
One of courage and ambition.
They represent another path to manhood.
Yeah.
Pioneers pushing the boundaries of their world.
It shows that even within Mandinka society, there was room for different expressions of, I don't know, ambition.
An identity.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And then we get to the moment that changes everything.
Oh, yeah.
Kunta Kinte's manhood training.
This is where things get really intense.
It-
Haley describes the Jujuo in such vivid detail.
Yeah.
The blindfolded journey.
Right.
The separation from family. The rigorous training.
Yeah.
The constant threat of punishment.
It was a brutal rite of passage
It was, but also necessary in their culture.
to transform boys into men,
Exactly.
equipping them with the skills and resilience they'd need to survive.
Right, and there's that one anecdote
Yeah, what's that?
where Kunta Kinte encounters lions on his way to his uncle's new village.
Oh, wow. Talk about a trial by fire.
Imagine that, being a young man alone in the wilderness,
Scary.
knowing that danger could be lurking around every corner.
That's intense.
It really speaks to his courage and determination.
But it wasn't all just about physical strength.
No.
There's also a strong emphasis on learning their history and traditions.
Of course, that was vital.
Haley describes the visit of the griot,
Yes.
who comes to share stories and teachings about the Mandinka people.
This oral history was their most valuable possession.
It really shows the power of storytelling. It does.
And how it can preserve cultural memory.
Absolutely.
Kunta Kinte is really moved by all this.
He is, so much so that he buys a holy mark from the griot,
Right, a small piece of goat skin.
blessed by the holy man,
He wants to save it for his firstborn son.
as a symbol of their heritage.
It's a beautiful gesture.
It is.
It shows how aware he is of his own legacy.
And how important it is to pass that on.
Yeah, and it kind of foreshadows the role family and heritage will play in his life,
It does.
even as he's about to be ripped away from everything he knows.
Because this is where the story takes that dark turn,
Yeah, Kunta Kinte returns to Darfur as a man.
ready to take his place in the village.
But fate, as we know, has other plans.
This is where we see the brutality of the slave trade up close and personal.
Haley doesn't hold back,
No, he doesn't.
describing Kunta Kinte's capture,
The confusion.
the cruelty of the two-bob.
The white man.
Yeah.
The shackling.
It's heartbreaking.
It's all so visceral and difficult to read.
But yes, it's important to understand the dehumanizing nature of slavery.
How it reduced people to commodities,
To objects.
to be bought and sold.
Precisely.
There's this one chilling moment where a trader on the ship
Yeah.
is killed for betraying his own people.
It shows the desperation of the situation.
Yeah, how people were driven to make terrible choices.
But even in the midst of this horror,
Yeah.
there are glimmers of humanity.
Like what?
Haley describes this moment of connection
Okay.
between Kunta Kinte and another captive who also speaks Mandinka
It's a small spark of hope.
in this horrific situation.
A reminder that they're not alone.
But they share an identity.
Yeah, even in this terrifying and alien environment.
Exactly.
And then comes the arrival in America.
The auction,
Yeah.
the disorientation,
Of being in a new world,
where you're no longer a person.
but property.
Kunta Kinte is thrust into this reality,
Having to adapt to a new language, new customs.
a completely different way of life.
This is where Kunta Kinte's journey as a slave truly begins.
It is a new and hostile world.
And we'll delve into that part of his story in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
When we left off, Kunta Kinte had just arrived in America.
After that horrific journey across the Atlantic,
It's hard to fathom what must have been going through his mind.
it was a moment of just utter disorientation and loss for him,
Yeah, stripped of his freedom.
and thrown into this totally unfamiliar world.
He's no longer a man with a name and a history.
Just a commodity to be bought and sold.
Haley's description of that auction,
It's gut-wrenching.
it really highlights that dehumanization at the heart of slavery.
It does.
So Kunta Kinte ends up at Massa Waller's plantation.
Right.
And I was struck by how even the simple things must have been jarring for him.
Like what?
Well, Haley mentions him witnessing the butchering of a pig.
Yeah, that's a small detail.
But it speaks volumes.
Especially when you consider that, pigs are considered unclean in Islam.
Right.
So this would have been deeply unsettling to Kunta Kinte.
For sure. It shows how everything about this new world was just completely at odds with his beliefs.
And his cultural upbringing.
He's surrounded by unfamiliar sights, sounds.
Smells. He's completely isolated.
And then there's the language barrier.
Right. A huge obstacle.
But even in these dehumanizing circumstances.
Haley shows us that human connection can still emerge.
Yeah, like with Belle.
The cook on the plantation.
Yeah, she initially shows Kunta Kinte some kindness.
She does.
But she becomes kind of a complex figure, doesn't she?
She does, because on the one hand,
Sure.
she's trying to help him adjust.
Yeah.
But later on,
There's conflict between them.
there is.
It's almost like...
It highlights the different ways
Yeah.
that enslaved people coped with their situation.
Right, within that community.
Exactly. Belle represents a kind of pragmatism.
Born it out of years of living under oppression.
She sees kindness to the slaveholders.
Right.
As a way to maybe ensure a slightly easier life.
We see something similar with the fiddler.
Who teaches Kunta Kinte English?
Yeah, on the surface, he seems to have accepted his lot.
Right, finding ways to enjoy himself.
But you sense there's a deeper struggle there.
Yeah, Haley hints at that.
I don't know, it's like these characters.
They highlight different faces of resilience.
They're all trying to survive.
in their own way.
But Kunta Kinte never loses that desire for freedom.
No, he doesn't.
He attempts to escape 4 times.
It's incredible.
So brave.
But also heartbreaking.
Because each time he's captured,
And brutally punished.
it's a reminder of just how much power the slaveholders had.
And how the system was designed to crush any hope of resistance.
What really struck me, though,
Is that even after facing that brutality,
yeah,
Kunta Kinte refuses to be broken.
he clings to his identity,
To the memory of his homeland.
his family, his name.
It's powerful.
And it's here where we see the power of language.
There's resistance.
Yeah, Kunta Kinte never fully embraces English. It's like by holding on to Mandinka.
He's holding on to a part of himself that can't take away a part of his soul.
It's a powerful symbol of cultural survival.
And this theme is carried forward with the birth of Kizzy,
Kunta Kinte's daughter.
a new generation born into slavery.
With no memory of Africa.
But Kunta Kinte, he's determined to keep that connection alive.
To instill in her a sense of her heritage.
He teaches her Mandinka words.
Shares what he can about his life in Jofure.
And he even gives her the holy mark.
That he bought from the Grayet.
Yeah, that tangible link to their ancestry. There's that beautiful scene.
Where he teaches her the Mandinka words for different parts of the body.
That's such a simple act.
But so powerful.
A way for him to pass on a piece of himself.
A piece of their culture.
That can't be taken away.
It really highlights the importance of oral history.
Of storytelling.
In preserving cultural identity.
Those stories become a lifeline for Kizzy.
Connecting her to a past she never knew.
To a place you'll likely never see. But Kizzy's also growing up in this world, shaped by her relationship with Missy Ann.
Manswaller's daughter.
Yeah, she's caught between 2 worlds. The world of her parents.
With their longing for freedom.
Their stories of Africa.
And then the world of the big house.
With its relative comfort and privilege.
It's a complex situation.
It is.
And one that many enslaved families faced. Belle, Kizzy's mother, sees Missy Ann as a potential protector.
Right, she believes that if Kizzy is favored by her mistress,
Yeah.
it might shield her from some of the harsher realities of slavery.
But Kunta Kinte is wary of this relationship.
Of course, he understands the danger of Kizzy getting too close to her white mistress.
Of losing touch with her heritage.
It's a reminder that even within this horrific system,
There were nuances to navigate.
difficult choices to make.
And those choices have devastating consequences.
When Kizzy falls in love with Noah
A young enslaved man.
and helps him try to escape,
By forging a traveling pass.
when the escape is discovered,
The consequences are brutal.
Kizzy is whipped
And sold away from her family.
to a new plantation in North Carolina.
It's one of the most heartbreaking moments in the book.
It shows the absolute power that slaveholders held over the lives of enslaved people.
How easily families could be torn apart.
It's horrific.
But even in this new and terrifying situation,
Kizzy finds a way to survive
she builds a new life.
and gives birth to a son, George.
Who becomes known as Chicken George.
His arrival marks a new chapter in the story.
Born into slavery with no direct experience of Africa.
But his mother makes sure to instill in him a sense of his heritage.
And Chicken George is a fascinating character.
He is.
Unlike his grandfather.
He's more adaptable.
Yeah, more willing to play the game.
He develops a talent for training gamecocks.
Which earns him a certain level of respect from his master.
Mathalia.
Right.
Even a bit of affection.
But even this relative privilege
doesn't shield him from the reality of slavery.
He's still property.
Still subject to his master's whims.
And there's that powerful scene where Chicken George teaches his own son, Tom, a few Mandinka words.
It's a reminder that even generations removed from Africa,
that connection to their heritage remains.
These fragments of language,
these stories,
become a way to keep that ancestral memory alive.
Like a chain linking each generation
to the next,
to their shared past. But this chain is threatened once again.
When Mathalia falls into debt.
And has to sell his slaves to pay it off.
Another devastating reminder of how precarious their lives were.
Even those who had carved out a semblance of stability
could be torn from everything they knew.
The story of Kunta Kinte's family now moves towards a new and uncertain future.
But one thing remains constant.
What's that?
The stories, the memories.
The legacy of their African heritage.
That continues to be passed down.
And it's this legacy that ultimately leads to Alex Haley's own journey to uncover his family's past.
Right, we'll explore that part of the story.
And the impact of roots in the final part of our deep dive. We left off with Kunta Kinte's descendants facing another upheaval, being sold off to settle their master's debts.
It really drives home the point that even generations later, the shadow of slavery, it still loomed large over their lives.
It's a constant threat hanging over them. But this section of Roots also brings us to
the brink of a turning point in American history.
Yeah.
The Civil War, Prince Chicken George's son.
Right. And his family.
It's a time of immense uncertainty.
Yeah, you have the talk of emancipation.
These whispers of a future where slavery might finally be abolished.
But at the same time,
you have the reality of war.
Yeah, right on their doorstep.
Haley does a great job of describing the Confederate Army marching through their town.
Yeah.
The sounds of drums and bugles.
That really puts you right there.
That tension in the air.
It's a reminder that this war
is not some distant event.
It's about to change their lives forever.
And the threat isn't just from the Confederate Army.
What do you mean?
Well, we see the return of a familiar face.
Oh, who's that?
The notorious slave catcher, Cates.
The one who captured and punished Kunta Kinte.
The very same.
It's like a ghost from the past coming back to haunt them.
He represents the enduring power of that slave system.
Even as it's on the verge of collapse.
Exactly. His presence shows that the fight for freedom, it's far from over.
And it's interesting how Haley shows the complexity of this period.
But how so?
He mentions how some enslaved people actually choose to side with the Confederacy.
Yeah, hoping to gain favor, maybe even freedom.
It's tough to understand from our perspective today.
But it shows the impossible choices people faced.
Yeah, caught in the middle of a war that wasn't really theirs.
Imagine being enslaved your entire life.
Right.
Taught to obey your master, and then suddenly there's this chaotic war.
With both sides making promises.
It's a recipe for difficult decisions.
With unimaginable consequences.
Absolutely.
And the war's impact isn't limited to the enslaved community either.
What do you mean?
Well, we see Mathalia,
Chicken George's former master.
Right, facing his own downfall.
His fortune is dwindling.
He's turned to alcohol.
His world is falling apart.
Haley shows that war doesn't discriminate in its destruction.
It leaves scars on everyone involved.
But then comes the moment that changes everything.
The Emancipation Proclamation.
Freedom at last.
But even this long-awaited freedom, it's met with mixed emotions.
Of course there's joy and relief.
But also uncertainty and fear.
Imagine stepping out of a prison you've known your whole life.
Into a world you barely recognize.
It must have been both exhilarating and terrifying.
Absolutely. And Haley doesn't sugarcoat the challenges ahead.
Right. Freedom doesn't magically erase generations of oppression.
Newly freed people still face discrimination.
Poverty.
Violence.
They have to rebuild their lives from scratch.
With very little support.
But even with these challenges,
there's also incredible resilience.
We see this in their departure from Massa Murray's plantation.
It's like they're leaving behind a lifetime of servitude.
But carrying with them the stories,
the traditions,
the memories that have sustained them for so long.
And they have each other.
Family and community become so important.
As they navigate this new world.
Where they're finally free to determine their own destiny. Chicken George, true to form, steps up to lead the families to Tennessee.
Where they hope to start a new life.
He embodies that resourcefulness.
That belief in a better future.
And Tom uses his blacksmithing skills,
Which he honed during his enslavement.
to support his family
Build a new life.
in this new community.
But even as they celebrate their hard-won freedom.
Haley reminds us
Yeah.
that the trauma of slavery, it lingers.
Like when Matilda
Tom's mother and Chicken George's wife.
passes away shortly after they arrive in Tennessee.
It's a reminder that even in victory,
There's loss,
the past doesn't just disappear.
but they persevere.
Tom and his wife Irene,
They build a life, raise a family.
and most importantly,
Yeah.
keep the stories of their ancestors alive.
Making sure Kunta Kinte's legacy lives on.
And it's through those stories
Passed down through generations.
that Alex Haley, a descendant of Kunta Kinte,
Embarks on his own journey.
to uncover his family's past,
He travels to the Gambia, consults with griots,
pieces together the fragments of history.
and brings Kunta Kinte's story to the world.
It makes you think, what if Chicken George hadn't passed down those stories?
Would we even know Kunta Kinte's name today?
It highlights the importance of preserving our history,
Understanding where we come from.
honoring the sacrifices of those who came before us.
Their stories are our stories,
They shape who we are.
both individually and as a society.
Roots is more than just a book.
It's a testament to the human spirit,
The power of family.
the importance of remembering our past.
No matter how painful it may be,
It reminds us that we are all connected
across generations and continents.
through this shared tapestry of human experience.
This has been a powerful deep dive into a story.
That continues to resonate with us today.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.